Well, I'm ready for today because I got my sexy shirt on, I got my sexy shoes, and by sexy I mean not covered in coffee stains and torn apart. Huh? Old Navy. I got my sexy strap, and I got my sexy camera. Brand new Fuji X-T100. But is this brand new camera style with no substance just like me? We're gonna find out today. Welcome back, DPReview TV viewers. It's Chris Nichols here for DPReview, and I might not be as sexy as I think, but this camera certainly is. I'm excited to play with it, but you know, it's a hot day. When we're not complaining about how cold it is, we're complaining about how hot it is, and the light is so I thought we'd head into the downtown core today and maybe make use of some of that hard light on some of the architecture and have some fun. I've got a couple of these puppies to play with, and we do have final firmware. So we're gonna really focus on the handling, the aesthetics, the controls, and see what kind of shooting experience we get today. All right, I want to talk about this little dial up here on the top left. It's a nice addition, and by default, it engages Fuji's film simulation modes, which is just their fancy way of doing color profiles. Fuji mimic it off of their classic film stock. But really what this lets you do is play around with color, contrast, sharpness, saturation in JPEG mode. And I'm gonna be the first to admit this, you know, when photographers get to a point where they're starting to shoot raw and they're getting skilled with stuff, they do a lot of this in post, and we start to really kind of get snobby and elitist about these things where we don't even ever touch the film simulation modes. We don't ever touch the color profiles. We might even get to the point on YouTube where we make merchandise that espouses the use of shooting raw exclusively. And so you know what I thought I would do is give myself an interesting challenge, not just for the fun of it, but also to give this video some structure. And I'm gonna go back to where we all started, which was with JPEG, and I'm gonna force myself to give you folks one photo from each of the simulation modes that I have in here, okay? And once I've spent it, well, then I'm gonna have to go to a different mode. And we're just gonna look at JPEG, say, of course I'm shooting JPEG plus RAW, and we can always look at those in the sample galleries on DPReview.com later. But really, I think this would be a fun challenge, and a lot of people are gonna start out this way. But it does bring up another interesting point. This dial on the top left, when you're ready to perhaps graduate from shooting a lot of JPEGs, can be customized, and I really like that. You know, the Pen F from Olympus did something similar, but you couldn't change it later. This does let you now move to setting it for ISO or white balance or autofocusing modes and all sorts of other stuff. So as you get better with the camera and want to expand, this dial will expand with you. Now the EVF on here, of course, is one of the big changes, and the LCD screen as well. And I'm a little surprised because when you think about a lower price point camera, these are usually the first things to get sacrificed. Now, first off, talking about the screen, it's bright out here, as you've seen today, and so it's hard to see it in the sunlight, but I love the articulation. And this is one of the smartest systems I've seen. You get nice control for vertical as well as horizontal movement, and you can even do selfies. It's just over 1 million dots on there. It's decent resolution. The only problem is, if I want to look at the camera from this side, I can't angle it towards me. I still think the best option is the single pillar coming down the side, like you see on a lot of Panasonics and Canons. But on a bright day like this, if the screen's not working for you, we now have the EVF here. It's great to use because it's the same one as the X-T20. So these are really nice bonuses on an affordable camera. All right, so I've changed my film simulation mode here with the left dial to monochrome, but with a green filter, just to kind of darken down this red wall in comparison to everything else. But I do also have to remember that this is JPEG. So I've got my exposure comp over here on the right, and I'm gonna raise that a little bit because this is JPEG, and I will not be able to fix it later.
Is it a masterpiece?
It's not bad. So two negatives I want to mention here right now. First off, I'm taking a picture of this building and I'm playing with the film simulation modes and I don't get acros, and this photo would be great for acros to show all the beautiful tones. Why did they take it off? I know the film's being discontinued, doesn't mean it has to be discontinued in the camera. So I have to use monochrome with a red filter. It's dramatic, but it's not what I wanted. On top of that, zooming with this 15 to 45, it's got a few little steps in the zoom there, you know, it's just like zzz, zzz, zzz. It's not a big deal, but it's picking at me. It's bugging me a little bit. But one thing I do really like as I'm flicking through all these different modes is It is an awesome graphic interface for this. I mean, you bring up the film simulations, you can see what your preview is going to be, but you can also see a lot of the adjacent film profiles as well. And it's just a really sexy, easy to use way to do it. Fuji's obviously put some thought in there. In fact, I also like the simplified menu system on this brand new X-T100. I really like the graphic interface. It is way better than the XA5. The only complaint I actually have is the classic quick menu is still there, and you can customize it. It's just really ugly. It doesn't have the same sexiness to it, so I kind of wish they would have updated that as well. I'm committing. Okay, so I just shot that in the monochrome mode, but with a yellow filter. And the reason I'm deciding to do that, I've got some blue sky above with clouds, and the yellow is going to give just a little bit darker tone to the blue, make it stand out a bit. It's kind of giving me deja vu because the last time I was here, I think I was shooting in a very similar spot. This is a very similar photo, but using a Nikon F4 with Tri-X in it. So there you go. It's like the next best thing. So you know, earlier, Jordan, I was saying that I prefer when the screen swings out to the side with the center pillar and then you can rotate it there like you have on the GH5 you're shooting right now. But this does give us the benefit that we can do vertical shooting without having to flip the whole screen out. So I mean, that is nice. And then with selfies, yeah, we can rotate it still. Yeah, it's a pretty good screen system. I think one of the major appeals on these cameras is just going to be aesthetically how they look. And I mean, again, a part of having a camera nowadays is having something that's stylish with the rest of your stuff. I really like the new colors. We've got this nice champagne gold. We've also got this dark gray, so you can take your pick, and there's boring black if you like that as well. Now, on the side here, there's this little plastic nipple. I'm surprised I haven't lost it yet. It's incredibly small, but it covers up some threads. And what you can actually do is go from a flat, smooth grip, which I haven't had any problems with, to this here. We've got this plastic grip to extend it. Just gives you that security, lets your fingers hold on there. It feels good too. I could go either way. Okay, so one of the things I love here is that when I change my mode dial, it gives me a digital representation on the screen. But when it comes to a lot of the other dials, there's actually some negatives to talk about. Then we've got this little plastic dial on the back. Jordan's had a hard time using it when he was playing with the camera. I don't find it that difficult, but still, it's in a weird position. And if I push down on it, well, then it becomes a manual focus assist, but only in manual focus. And I cannot find any way to customize that beyond that. And it doesn't end there. You see the quick menu button here. It's in a good position, but it's also in a really good position that this could be an AF on button. Now I know that's a more advanced technique, but still, if you're gonna start growing up with this camera and get into more advanced stuff, I really want this to be AF on, and I have no recourse. I do have a customizable function button right here. Why can't I make this the quick menu and then make this a customizable function one for autofocus on or whatever else I want it to be? So this is stuff that's easy to update in firmware. I really hope that we're going to see that. And if any company does update things regularly in their firmware, it's Fuji. But at the same time, it does seem short-sighted that I can't customize more of these buttons and controls. So we have a touchscreen interface on the X-T100, but unfortunately this is kind of a weakness on the camera. I mean, it's quite laggy. When you're trying to move the focusing point around or change the zone, it's pretty slow. And I feel like, especially when you bring it up to your eye through the EVF, it becomes almost unusable. Now, because there aren't a lot of customized buttons, what the X-T100 has is this sort of swipe interface. I can swipe north, south, east, and west on the screen, basically, and I can customize those functions. And that's nice, except that you gotta swipe in a very quick and particular way, in a very precise way. And so, I mean, if you're just kind of messing around or trying to switch something, no big deal. But if you're shooting quickly or you're rushed for time or you want a camera that's really responsive, it's absolutely frustrating. So not a big plus here, unfortunately, but what can you do? Will these rotate? Full rotation, what? As you can see, the light on me is pretty harsh right now, and so a little fill flash could be useful, and luckily for beginners, we have a nice little pop-up flash here. It's, you know, handy and it's discreet. Of course, you can put on more external, more powerful bounce flashes as well if you want to. On top of that, we've got pretty decent battery life, 430 shots. And we also have Bluetooth Wi-Fi support, and that makes sense. I mean, we were at an age where everybody wanted Wi-Fi in their cameras. Now we're at an age where everybody's gonna want Bluetooth. It makes it quick and easy. It's a nice step up for an entry-level person coming from a smartphone as well. All right, so I just took another shot of those people across the street and I like it. And I did that in Provia, the standard mode, which has always been my kind of go-to mode for Fujis and their film simulations. Now I'm a big fan of using auto ISO, whether it be in manual mode where I set my own aperture and shutter speed and let the ISO do its thing, or even in aperture priority, for example, where I can set a minimum shutter speed and then the camera will endeavor to keep me there with the ISO control. I could set multiple scenarios with certain minimum shutter speeds, maximum ISO potential, and it's just a really nice way to set up the camera. Okay, so I've used up my Pro Neg standard capture mode, which is good for skin tones, but with a little bit less contrast. And of course, I asked these ladies on the street if I could take their picture, but really, really strong contrast. So it helped reduce that a little bit. I had to overexpose a bit to get those shadows to show up a little bit nicer so they don't have just, dark contrast on their faces. But the background blows out. Again, that's JPEG, that's the game. Okay, so it's too hot. We're getting grumpy, we're very tired, and the light, it's pretty harsh today, so we want to see if maybe tomorrow brings a different kind of light. We're going to play with that. It also gives us a chance to look at the files we've taken so far in the video. We will see you folks tomorrow, bright and early, and we're going to be refreshed. We're going to keep going with the video. All right, well, it's day 2. We are back, and we do have different light today. There's quite a bit of cloud cover, so saturation is going to change. We'll get a different feel to the photographs. A few more things to talk about, so let's get right back to it. All right, so I just shot my Astia photo and I took a picture of a magpie. It's kind of like Alberta's pigeon. They're all over the place, but they've got a beautiful blue coloring. And on a soft day like this, the Astia keeps the tone very smooth, but it's a little bit more color and vividness than you would get out of the classic chrome, which is very flat. Now anyways, I shot this magpie, but I used a certain mode here. It's a 4K shooting mode, basically like a burst. This would be very akin to a Panasonic 4K photo mode, for example. What the X-T100 is doing here is shooting at 15 frames per second in 4K mode, so you're not getting in the 30 frame per second or 60 frame per second burst mode that some of the competitors have, but it's still very handy. I could just leave the camera pointed at the magpie, put it on pre-record, and then when I see the moment I want, I hit the shutter. Now what the X-T100 does is it saves 15 shots before that and 15 shots after that, effectively 1 second before the moment and 1 second after. And as you can see here, I can then choose the exact mode that I want. It's not as good as competition, but it's better than nothing, and it worked for the shot. All right, so I don't love this photo, but our light is very soft. I'm gonna shoot Velvia on this graffiti, and we'll see what kind of kick it gives the photo. Also, it can't be appreciated through video, but it smells really bad. All right, just getting a couple shots there. I'm shooting the classic chrome for this one. I can't pass up water droplets on the leaves, and there's a lot of soft textures, so classic chrome is just gonna minimize the saturation, keep all the tones very smooth. And this whole video, I'm actually using just the 15 to 45 XC. This is their new kit lens for this camera. Is it gonna replace the XC 16 to 50? Possibly, I don't know. This is a power zoom, so it gives you that electronic zoom capability for video work. It does keep things nice and light, but I have to admit, this lens has a very plasticky, cheap kind of feel to it. You can see the molding marks. The zoom ring doesn't really inspire much confidence. Okay, I mean, they're fairly plastic and soft. As for close-up capability, nothing to write home about. I'm not getting in there very close, so I'm probably gonna crop this shot. However, the lens is focusing fairly smooth. It's what I'd expect from a kit lens, and it's performing fairly well. When I'm doing these close-ups, I'm trying to get my composition set. I don't wanna be touching focus and recomposing because I'm so close up, the depth of field's not gonna cover that for me. So I'm using the touchscreen to move my point around. And again, as I've mentioned, when I'm looking up in the EVF, it's quite slow. Off the back screen, I can set a very small point. I can move it around. I obviously don't need quick shooting here, but it is laggy, definitely. So this is definitely the most self-explanatory and pretentious photo I've ever taken. Now, autofocus performance on the X-T100, I would say, sits somewhere in between the XA5 and the X-T20. It's not the exact same system as the XA5. You are getting an improvement. It's a similar 91-point autofocusing system array. However, when it comes to the processor, Fuji's told us that they've actually doubled the DRAM. Better throughput, better AF performance, and so again, this is going to sit somewhere in between. But you compare this against a Rebel or a Nikon entry-level SLR, you're going to get very similar performance, and the hit rate on here is pretty good. Now, when it comes to image quality, again, I encourage you to check out the articles on DPReview. They're going to have very conclusive tests in the image quality. I do want to say one thing though, because what a lot of people are going to make a connection to is Fuji's own X-Trans sensors, something like the 24 megapixel sensor you find in the X-T20. Is there really a difference? this. And the way I see it, X-Trans was a very clever way of getting past the problems that we were facing back in the day with older sensors. 16 megapixel range where moire was an issue and you had to use low pass filters to really kind of blur it out. X-Trans was a very clever way to get past that issue, maintain the sharpness, and still get that lack of moire. Now, I think at this point, back to Bayer type sensor, this is a perfectly fine move. X-Trans just doesn't really have the same advantage that it did in the past, and I don't think you're gonna notice any problems or really be disappointed in any way. Well, the tilty screen's handy here. All right, Jordan, this is our last shot. Pro Neg High. This is gonna give us good skin tone, but just a little bit more punch, which is nice because the light's pretty soft here. You look tired.
Hey everyone, it's Jordan to talk about video on the X-T100, and let's just jump straight to the headline feature. So here we're looking at 4K footage from the X-T100, and you can see it looks quite good. Nice and sharp, certainly better than what we saw with the 1080. I mean, maybe a little bit over sharpened on this, but this is a pretty nice image, especially when you consider that it's got the film simulation modes. We're shooting on ProView right now, and oh God, oh, what's happening? What frame rate is this thing? 15 frames per second? That's useless. Ugh. Okay, so we're back to boring 1080 at 24 frames per second right now. It's a shame about the 4K, but it is really nice that we've finally got a fully articulating screen on this. That's something we've been wanting from Fuji for a long time. It's a shame that we saw it in this camera first as opposed to, say, the XH1, for example. But we do have a mic jack, although it's a 2.5mm, so you're gonna have to find an adapter or use Fuji's kind of subpar shotgun mic on that. You do also have some slow-mo functionality, but the 60 frames looks pretty rough. The 1080p quality, as you can see, is reasonable on this, kind of sits in between the XA5 and X-T20. There is definitely some aliasing with this. It looks like it's been over-sharpened, even if you tune the sharpening down in the camera quite a bit. But it's manageable for YouTube and things like that. One major issue I've got with this camera is it has the worst record button. Now, I don't want a record button that you're constantly going to be hitting accidentally all the time, but when I'm trying to turn this on, I would say I can start the recording about half the time. It's really recessed and you have to hold it down for a second to actually start or stop recording. It is pretty awful and I don't like it. So unfortunately we have the same issue still, where you can get some very nice 4K recording on some of the Panasonic cameras at this price point, but the autofocus is going to be rocky. If you want a camera with a fully articulating screen and good autofocus, you're recording 1080 on either this or the EOS M50. We still haven't seen the perfect vlogging camera, but as primarily a still camera that can capture some video, this is passable.
I enjoyed using the X-T100, and that's because I think Fuji's been quite thoughtful in its design. You know, as entry-level cameras go, it's actually very well constructed. It doesn't feel cheap at all. It's a sexy-looking camera, absolutely. I like the color choices. I also like that Fuji's giving a lot of emphasis on the JPEGs, and although film simulation modes are nothing new, it makes it easy and fun to start playing with JPEGs, and this is great because a lot of people, that's where they're gonna start. You know, if you're gonna reach the point where you're ready to shoot RAW, you have to enjoy using the camera as you're shooting JPEGs to move up to that point. And this is a very enjoyable camera. It's an excellent walk-around companion camera, but not being able to customize some of the other controls. You know, the autofocus not really letting you move farther into faster, more action-oriented kinds of photography. I think it's going to hold you back there. Now, I would consider this camera's closest competition to be the Canon EOS M50, and in comparison there, I still have to give the edge to the Fuji X-T100, and that's largely because of the amazing line of lenses that Fuji have invested in this platform. The M50 handles very well, but they just did not give it the lenses that it needs. On top of that, I do feel that this is a more classy body, definitely the M50. It feels nicer, it looks nicer, and so I think the X-T100 is a great way to go. In fact, this just puts more pressure on the Sony a6000, which is now really starting to show its age, especially when we have cameras that have a luxurious feel and look like this one have. Now, compared to an SLR at a similar price point, I think you can get very similar features, although it does have to be appreciated that Fuji has a larger line of lenses specifically for APS-C size sensors than you would find from Nikon or Canon, both companies famous for having tons of lenses. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, subscribe to our channel, check us out on Instagram, tweet to us, let us know your comments below, let us know what you think, and enjoy those JPEGs. It was a kind of a departure for me here, but a fun challenge. Till next time, see you soon.